Okay. Well, can I welcome everyone here this afternoon? I know it's been an incredibly long week so far. I can't believe that, in fact, it's only Tuesday, frankly. I was sure it was Friday this morning when I woke up. I'd like to welcome those who are watching on live stream. And this session really is to follow on from the excellent Health and Climate Change Day that we had at the start of the COP process. And I know some people wondered whether or not it would be an effective launch to this convergence of policies. But frankly, as someone who's pretty cynical about some of these things, I thought it was a really excellent launch. And credit to the organisers, to the presidency, the UAE presidency of the COP process that they got this going. And so this session is very much to follow on from it. And we're now past the stage of polemics when it comes to the issue of AMR. And now that we recognise that the impact of climate change on antimicrobial resistance is significant, whether it's through flooding, and therefore, the people are having to move from their homes, the increased urbanisation, and the fact that that microbes, of course, are much more prevalent in those situations, or the fact that the increased temperatures, of course, mean that the evolution of resistance is actually accelerating, then what we've got to do is look very seriously at how we deal with AMR in this context of climate change. And the reason for having this session today, and I want to thank Glide, Simon, I know you've had a busy week with everything that you've been doing on the Last Mile initiative, and also Najat for the International Atomic Energy Agency, who we work very closely with at the G20, G7 Health and Development Partner. And indeed, Najat is one of our global ambassadors on global health and development. So thank you for your support on this. But the aim really, I've got to be honest with you, is not to have a nice afternoon discussion about AMR. We've got 12 months coming up where, in my view, either we make concrete progress or we will have missed a massive opportunity. And so for me as a former politician and as chair of the G20, G7 Health and Development Partnership, we see next year as an important year of convergence around a very small group of recommendations of action on AMR, and then for us to work together as multi-agency, organisations to get some political action to make sure that we can actually get progress in tackling AMR. And I can say this because I'm an independent figure, but we put all of the work in to get the resolution out of the UN high-level meeting this September on universal health coverage. And to be honest with you, it was a big sigh of relief that the thing got agreed. But the question is, what difference is it going to make on universal health coverage? And frankly, if September of next year we have a similar high-level meeting on AMR, and we end up with a similar Christmas tree of a resolution, then we will have missed a massive opportunity. And the other thing that is critical, of course, and the difference is that we also, as well as having the high-level meeting at the UN, we also have the high-level ministerial meeting in Riyadh in November. And so there's a series of initiatives next year where we will be able to try and ramp up the political pressure to try and make sure that heads of government and ministers and parliaments actually take action in this critical area. We've got the World Health Assembly meeting in May. There will be the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting. There will be the UN General Assembly high-level meeting. And then we'll have the ministerial meeting in November. And I think if we get to this point next year, we've got to be clear that we've got a set of very, very concrete actions, and we know how we're taking this forward. And some of our speakers will talk about what those actions have to be. We don't need to revisit all of the evidence. We know the scale of the problem with antimicrobial resistance, and we know the path that it's taking. It's now time for us to agree on those limited number of actions to deal with. So we've got two presentations or comments first, and then we've got an incredible panel, and I'm conscious of the time. And the first speaker is Najat Mokhtar, who's the Deputy Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency. And Najat heads up the work on health and has been a fantastic champion, not just on AMR, but on so many of the other issues. So I'll hand over to you, Najat. It's a bit tight here.
And good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our pavilion, Atoms for Climate. Very happy to have you here and follow up on Alan's introductory remarks about AMR and the role of each one of us to promote the action. I think we know the issue, but we need to have coordinated action about how we tackle this issue. I'm happy that for this gathering here at COP28 that the climate change and health has been tackled and been a declaration. As you have said, that at least it's a beginning, and it's something that we need now, maybe in next COP, that we have some funding that follows, and AMR is also on the list of action to be followed up. Maybe some of you are wondering why the IAEA and what is nuclear power, as you see in that, to do with AMR. But, you know, we are a technical organization. We are offering technology to tackle many global issues, particularly sustainable development issues. And when we talk about antimicrobial resistance, we are working on that, and because we need science, we need data, we need to understand what is happening, and if we have action, we need to monitor it. We have labs, and we hope that next time we will have the meeting in our facilities and see you there in our labs. We are looking at AMRs in the soil, using the technology about how much is in there, how we can monitor. We are looking at AMRs in the from animal health perspective. We are looking at AMR in the environment, in air, in water, and we are developing technologies to really make sure that what we are measuring is correct and appropriate. But in addition to that, we are transferring this technology to member states, 174 member states, to really make sure that this technology is being used properly and data provided are accurate. This is very important. We are talking about artificial intelligence, and we need data for artificial intelligence, not to only assess what is happening now in the world, but what's going to happen through modeling in the future. And this is, I think, where IAEA can be a major player, because we are good at database. We have many, and precipitation, underground water, surface water. We have labs, network of labs all over the world, 148 laboratories in animal health. We have 146 laboratories on veterinary vet lab network, one of the biggest. And also marine environment laboratories, where also we assess marine environment, underground water, also a network of laboratories. And I think the group can use this network and these possibilities to really gather as much information as we can. We are doing our bit, and I think together we can do more, collaborating together. And it's about that. It's about coordinating who is doing what and how we can complement each other, not repeating. Of course, we need finance, because when we do science and research, I think the finance goes down, and particularly when we talk about IAEA, but we are happy to collaborate with WHO, with FAO, with anybody who wants to talk about science and technology, because we are a technical organization. We can work with anybody, private sector, anybody. I'm very happy to be, championing this cause, and we do whatever we can really to bring solutions on the ground. And I thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, thanks, Najat. And you know, lots of people don't realise the outreach that the International Atomic Energy Agency has, and we've certainly been working very closely with you for the last few years. I mentioned that the high-level ministerial meeting that will be held in November will be in Riyadh. But in the work that we've been doing in the partnership, we've been incredibly impressed by the Public Health Authority in Saudi Arabia, and visited many times the facility there, and the quality of the scientists and the team that there is incredible. And Dr. Abdullah Al-Ghazani is the CEO of that group, and we've had a couple of opportunities to have an exchange of views, and I know you've got very clear views now on the role that Saudi Arabia can play, and we really hope that beyond the ministerial meeting, Abdullah, that beyond the ministerial meeting you will, or Saudi Arabia will continue to champion AMR, and we hope you'll champion it through onto 2030. Because we need to have some wins when it comes to the Sustainable Development Goals. So please, we'd like to hear your remarks.
Thank you, Alan, and thank you very much to be part of this lovely event, lovely group, and important topic. For sure, the climate change and the impact on AMR, it's an important subject. It is the impact of climate in terms of on the AMR. It's one of the hot topic and important to be discussed. The climate and the change around the world will and has been enhance the urbanization and enhance the human-animal interface and human-vector as well interface. And that's, for instance, has, for a reason or another, increased the utilization of antimicrobial in healthcare facility. Especially in countries that it has no policy to regulate an AMR. So, in a way or another, the climate change it has an impact on the antimicrobial resistance and may enhance it, and that's need to be taken in action. And also need to be recognized. Though there is also chance and knowledge need to be filled in how really the climate in the molecular level has changed and how can it enhance the resistance. We at Saudi Arabia, we took the two topic at a very important. We do have a big initiative in Saudi Arabia in terms of climate. We do have the Green Saudi Green initiatives with 77 initiatives. That's really with ambitious goal and also a pledge for net zero by 2060. In terms of the AMR, we do have one health approach in various parts of our work and what we do. National organization in Saudi Arabia, like Public Health Authority, Saudi FDA, and National Center for Animal Disease, in their board of directors, the multi-sectoral part, so represented from various parts of organization. So it's deep-rooted within DNA, that not only from organization, but also in implementation as well. We had a national action plan, and we are one of the few countries that they have actually budgeted a national action plan, and that's actually we updated it in 2021 with targeted goals and objectives, and luckily we are implemented it in a multi-sectoral, not only in government but also private sector and the third sector. We took AMR in a very serious manner. We put AMR as a priority in the G20 during the Kingdom presidency in 2020. We put it also, we play a pivotal role in global health security agenda as the steering group. And we work through all these initiatives and plans to enhance AMR in the agenda. And lastly, the Kingdom is, as you mentioned, Alan, hosting the High Ministerial meeting in 2024 in November, and we would like to see you all there. And with the ambition to have a very bold, targeted outcome, and build on the successes of the previous high-level ministerial meeting. So it's clearly that a lot of work need to be done, and there's a very busy 12 months, as you mentioned, Alan. Thank you very much.
So, I don't know whether there's a microphone lurking around here somewhere.
Yes, there is one.
No, that's a clicker. Someone's sitting on it. Oh, you've got it. So we've got an incredible panel of people who've joined us today, and this is to demonstrate already the level of cooperation in how we move forward over the next 12 months. And I'm delighted that Hailey is with us, who is running the administration for the quadripartite organization at the World Health Organization. And this is to get the multi-agencies within the United Nations working together, whether it's animal health or food, obviously the World Health Organization and others. And Hailey's got an incredible backstory in dealing with things like HIV, AIDS, and so forth. So he's the ideal person to do that. So thank you for joining us today as the director of the Quadripartite Secretariat. We've got Simon Bland, as I mentioned, who heads up the Global Institute for Disease Elimination in Abu Dhabi. And then Klaus Rung, who's the Senior Vice President for Public Affairs and Sustainability at Bayer. And they do an enormous amount of work, not just in human health, but also in agriculture, which will be interesting to hear his comments. We've got AMR Abdo, who's the manager for human development at the Islamic Development Bank. And thank you so much for joining us, because, again, ISDB, with, I think, 56 country shareholders, or 57 countries across the Islamic world, representing many billions of people. And obviously that development bank plays an important role in this community. And then Thomas Taylor, who's the head of climate finance at Aviva Investors. Thomas, thanks for being here. And obviously these initiatives that we're looking at, not just on AMR, but many of the initiatives we've talked about when it comes to global health and climate change, we need the private sector to be involved in this. And obviously your comments are important. And then David Rippon, who is the Executive Vice President for the Clinton Health Access Initiative and the Chief Scientific Officer. So we've got this fantastic array of experts, and thanks for joining us. And so what I'd like to do is just to pose a few questions. We've got a microphone there, which I assume is functioning. And Hailey, perhaps we could start with you if you'd like to join us here. And I guess the question is, how can the quadripartite AMR Secretariat coordinate actions among the four international organizations, and what specific initiatives are you currently working on that could take AMR, the whole AMR agenda forward?
Thank you, Alan, and good afternoon, everyone. And it's a pleasure to be here. And I'm representing, as Alan said, the Quadripartite Joint Secretariat on AMR, which is a standing secretariat of the four organizations: Food and Agriculture Organization, the World Animal Health Organization, the UN Environment Program, as well as the World Health Organization. And it is a standing secretariat based in WHO. And in fact, it was established following a request of the Secretary General to the principals of that time, the tripartite. UNEP wasn't officially, joined us in 2018 when the Secretary General received the report of the Interagency Coordination Group. That was established following the 2016 political declaration. As one of the action of that report of the IACG was that the tripartite at that time need to step up their function to actually respond to the multi-sectoral needs of AMR. So as part of that, the secretariat was established, and when it was established as a functional arrangement. Well, what I mean as a functional arrangement is it's at the goodwill of the principals. If one of the principals said, AMR is not my priority, this secretariat may not exist in its current shape. So that is why we are actually really looking forward to the ANGA high-level meeting next year, which we are also supporting as quadripartite, the co-facilitators of Barbados and Malta, is the actual recognition of this secretariat, because we have built a functional arrangement without creating a new agency. We are not creating a new agency. We are actually capitalizing on what is already there and making sure organizations share vision and have common goal and work together on a daily basis. The secretariat has, of course, I'm a director, but we have also core staff and liaison officers from the 4 organizations paid by the organizations. They contribute staff time, and not only these liaison officers work on a daily basis, but they also work by mobilizing the technical capacity of the respective organizations. We have clarity of the function of sector specific. So for example, FAO will be focusing on agri-food system, WAHA on animal health, UNEP on environment, and WHO on human health. And bringing this clarity and working together as a platform is important, but at the same time, we've been also working to strengthen sector-specific response in human health, in animal health, in agri-food system, as well as in environment. And that has been actually a major achievement of us, because we have developed a strategic framework with clear division of labor and also massive progress over the last 4 years since this secretariat was established. As part of the secretariat, we are also supporting the Global Leaders Group, which is chaired by Her Excellency Prime Minister Mia Motley of Barbados, who has been an ardent advocate and supporter of AMR. And we have active ministers and former ministers and heads of agencies in the Global Leaders Group, which is balanced actually across the sectors. We are very careful that this response, since it's a One Health response, we need to ensure that all sectors are equally represented in this type of bodies. And that has been critically important for raising the political profile of AMR. Just to give you one example about the high-level meeting, when the GLG started their function in 2020, they developed a plan of action with key performance indicators. One of the key performance indicators they put at that time was to advocate for ANGA high-level meeting either in 2024 or in 2026. And that has been pursued, and then in March 2022, the General Assembly actually, put a resolution for high-level meeting in 2024. And I can list all these key performance indicators which they are actually strictly following and implementing. And the other thing also, we are bringing different stakeholders, civil society, private sector, and also governments. And in addition to that, we established also the partnership platform, which bring all these three entities into a common goal, and it's been actually established, and FAO, as part of the Secretariat, is taking lead. And it was established in mid-November, where now we will have action groups of different stakeholders based on their own initiative and vision, actually to share common goal and common idea how to move forward. And one of the action groups that is established is also how to make the ANGA high-level meeting much more action-oriented. And as Alan said earlier, there is a real discussion, and the GLG is also discussing, because the resolution, the ANGA resolution that calls for the ANGA high-level meeting, actually mention the GLG to work with the President of the General Assembly and the co-facilitators to organize this meeting. So the GLG, as one of its key strategies, is looking for a very specific commitments with actionable language and responsible stakeholder. We've been doing analysis of the commitments from the 2016. There were 8 commitments, and it was very clear those commitments with actionable language, with responsible stakeholder, are implemented. All those with loose, soft language, they are not. So we are actually working towards that and really raising, and we hope the global AMR community will unify its voice, and that is critically important. Having divergent voices at this critical stage will be extremely missed opportunity. So our hope is that the global community will focus really to identify those 5, for example, specific challenges with specific commitments. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Haile. And that's why he's head of the Secretariat. I don't know whether these microphones are working. Are they okay? They are. That's fine. In that case, you can hand the microphone back, because we're going to give it in a moment to AMR. I mentioned that Simon runs the GLIDE organization, and I was at an event with GLIDE the other day where you really are designing your organization to be at the nexus of health and climate change. And I know that you're going to be conducting some further work in the next year, so perhaps, Simon, you could talk about that, about how that might be relevant to AMR. And then the other thing, of course, is how do we need to improve surveillance mechanisms to make sure that, for example, when it comes to AMR, we've got better data for the future. So over to you, Simon.
Alan, thank you so much. It's great to be here. Haile, it's great to see you again. Congratulations on all your work. I was lucky enough to work with Haile as a member. Were we the Interagency Task Force? I can't remember what we were called. Group that helped set up the tripartite and the quadripartite. And I contributed to the O'Neill Commission that looked at the economic costs of AMR. I now have the privilege of calling the UAE home in Abu Dhabi at the Global Institute for Disease Elimination, where we look at disease elimination and we think about malaria, a great illustration of resistance, both antimicrobial resistance, but also insecticide resistance and the challenges there, but polio and neglected diseases. And as I thought about AMR and climate and NTDs, they all have a common feature. They all are epitomes of market failures. They all have inadequate incentive structures to tackle them, and they're all going to demand collective action that isn't easy. And it's actually, if you think about Garrett Hardin's Tragedy of the Commons, which itself was based on Aristotle's work, we're dealing with a really ancient problem here, which is how we get collective action and get rational decisions for collective action, which at an individual level might not make sense. Not so very long ago, the chances are you would die of an infectious disease. Over the last 100 years, that made that less likely. Science, modern medicine meant that you were actually much more likely to succumb to a lifestyle disease. But then we saw a north-south divide. And in the south, you still had this high burden of infectious disease and a growing burden of NCDs. And so you had this inequity really pulling the world apart. Along came COVID and started infecting people in the north and killing people in the north. And we saw this relationship of comorbidities with with chronic illness and a new infectious disease. And I've just come from a dengue meeting, one of the neglected diseases, and we're seeing exactly the same. As dengue spreads, largely due to climate change, as dengue spreads into adult populations, in adult populations that have chronic illness, their outcomes are likely to be pretty bad. So more than ever, it looks like we're in this together. Despite that science and progress, what if the drugs don't work? What if that science now we lose? And this was Sally Davis' book and others, and people used to go to hospitals, it was a place to die. And then we'd go to hospitals as a place to be cured, and as a risk we go back to hospitals again if we don't have the drugs that we need, where it becomes an end-of-life situation. So I just want to basically say a couple of things, Alan, if I may. The first is, Julio Frank said, if we stand still, we go backwards. So we can't stand still. We need a pipeline of new tools, of new therapies, of new prophylaxis, of diagnostics, which I'll come on to in a second. But we have to think about equitable access. Okay. A lot of the world has excess use, if we talk antibiotics, and misuse of antibiotics, and a lot of the world doesn't have access to antibiotics. So we still have that north-south divide. So equity has to be a key point, a key principle of the work that we work on. We must bolster R&D to develop the pipeline. And we need a pipeline of tools to help with advocacy. Because if advocacy is just about problems and challenges and need, we're not going to get to where we need. We need to go with advocacy with solutions and tools and opportunities. So we need a massive input of R&D to give us the tools we need. We don't know enough about the interface of health and climate change. GLIDE has just commissioned 9 pieces of formative research to start to understand better, particularly vector-borne diseases and climate. But if there's one thing that I think the world could use, it would be a cheap, rapid, point-of-care, multiplex diagnostic tool. That would allow you to test and surveil. It would allow you to look at changes in endemicity and spread of disease. It would allow you to diagnose correctly and understand where to treat, where not to treat. Essentially, I'm talking about precision public health. And what the West could do now, not worrying too much about this development assistance for health, but is really help invest in global knowledge for public goods that allow that precision public health. Thank you, Alan.
Thanks very much, Simon, and we'll be looking with interest at the reports that you've commissioned during the course of next year. And as a member of the G20, G7 partnership, we'd like to help you with that. So on the issue of precision medicines, Klaus from Bayer, and this idea particularly of a diagnostic, I mean, where do you see the pharmaceutical industry going during the course of the next couple of years?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Alan, and thank you for the invitation to today's panel. Let me just go back in history. I mean, our company is like 160 years old, and one of the first antibiotics really was invented by a Bayer researcher. Domark was his name. He introduced sulfonamides in 1935, drastically cutting death rates for some infectious diseases. And we've been in antibiotic research since then. But roughly 15 years ago, we decided to stop research in this development in this area. We still produce existing antibiotics in our portfolio, but to Simon's point, there is somehow a lack of incentives, so the market doesn't function as other markets do. So usually you would develop a new antibiotic, would bring it to market, and then usually people would say, let's have it last line if the others don't work, so you have very small volumes. And then you cannot really recuperate the investment that you have had into R&D. And it's not just the case for large companies such as ours, it's also the case for biotech companies. So if they go and find venture capital, the venture capitalists would say, well, I would love to invest into pharmaceutical R&D, but better not in antibiotics, because afterwards, should you be successful, the return on investment will not be so sufficient. And I think there are discussions that we've seen over the past few years to improve the situation. we as Bayer have come back to the table indirectly. So we have given roughly 50 million euros together with our industry peers into a fund, the AMR Action Fund, the Antimicrobial Resistant Action Fund. We've collected roughly 1 billion with actually 3 goals. The one being investing into small and mid-sized companies, helping them to develop new novel antibiotics. So the goal is to get to 2 to 4 by the end of the decade. Secondly, to build partnerships, to help building partnerships in the ecosystem, especially also when it comes to proper use of these treatments. And thirdly, it's also advocating. And we see first signals that decision makers react upon it. So we see, for example, that in the EU there is discussions around granting an extra year of exclusivity to a product if you successfully develop an antibiotic and you can transfer it into other into other product categories, making it commercially attractive. Other things like in the UK would be that you have subscription models. So it's a flat payment, annual fee, so to say, for endless use and unlimited use of a novel antibiotic. So I think we need these kinds of mechanisms to make it more attractive. And if I might just end on the vector-borne diseases. So in my work, and as of January, I will be responsible for the commercial business also in 30 countries covering 1.5 billion people. But these countries are the countries where we are not present as Bayer. It's roughly 30 countries worldwide where we are not present. So, and these are the countries in the global south that do not have the proper means. And as a company, we have a broad range of products that are also fighting neglected tropical diseases, Chagas, river blindness, African sleeping disease, and others. But again, it's the same issue in terms of there is no market. So you have to partner. You have to partner with governments and other institutions to make it a viable case going forward. Because ultimately, the burden is super high. I mean, every year, 1.3 million people die because of antimicrobial resistance. And if we're on the wrong track, it will be 10 million by 2050. So I think also industry, coming back to your question, Alan, has understood the message that we really have to add. And that's why we have somehow reinvigorated our commitments by at least financially building this pool of money for smaller and mid-sized companies to do research in the field.
Thanks very much, Klaus. And we really do count on the pharma community to step up to the plate on this issue. And as you say, and it's very sad, I mean, I meet small and medium-sized biotech companies who've chosen to move out of the research and development in AMR tools because some of them have gone bust, having worked and produced something, but then there's no market. So on that point, we've got AMR with us from the Islamic Development Bank. And I have to say, AMR, under the new president of the bank, and with you there doing the work you're doing, it's incredible to see how flexible the bank can be in supporting initiatives on climate change and also on health. And I know you've got some financial mechanisms that you've been using to support initiatives amongst your 57 countries. And I just wonder if you'd like to say a few words about what some of those innovative initiatives are.
Thank you, Alan. As usual, it's really a great pleasure to see you. And thank you for all the organizers, those who are behind the scene, Julia and Hattis, I think. And thank you for being here. I think we have key partners here, Saudi Arabia, one of our member countries, the biggest shareholders. So, and key partners also, IAEA and WHO. And other also partners from the private sector. So thank you very much. It's really a pleasure to have all of you. So I will start by saying that the bank has increased its support to the climate change since it has been identified actually by our 57 member countries as really a big challenge, but in the same time, we are trying to make it an opportunities for them. And so how we are trying to make it an opportunity across three main areas. The first one is promoting the health infrastructure, so to be like more resilient, so using your renewable energy, clean technologies, and so on. This is one, and the second also to enhance the mitigation, the resilience of climate risk related to health. So, and the impact, the interaction is for us too obvious. And also the third one is to mitigate the environmental safeguard. So, contributing to the health issues. So, on strategic level, let us say there is one strategic direction that it has been signed in Qatar during the World Cup last year in November with the WHO Director General related to the antimicrobial resistance. And we have signed a strategic framework agreement trying to address AMR through the One Health spectrum, actually. So through health, human, and then environment. And we have two, let me say to be practical, we have two activities that have been identified. The first one is to develop and implement with the WHO the antimicrobial resistance stewardship program to enhance the capacity of our member countries in terms of fighting against the AMR or preventing them. And the second is to provide lending to the member countries that will be requesting to improve or to create their national public health laboratories. You know, it's a network from central level up to downstream. So these are the two key activities that we have agreed with WHO to work together across the whole at global level, but also at regional and at country level. And the person that has led that discussion is actually, she's not here, but I'm asking my colleague, Dr. Helesius, to convey to her our greetings, is Dr. Hanan Al-Bakhi, so the new RD for IMRO region, actually. She was the one as assistant DG at that time, in charge of AMR, so we worked together very closely. And by the way, during her appointment in October in Cairo, she told me, Ammar, why you didn't tell them that I'm the one that has prepared that strategic framework agreement. So now in terms of financing, we are offering, here I will list three practical, let us say, framework that we have put in place. The first one is at global level with WHO, and which is the health, you heard about it maybe, the Health Investment Impact Platform. So this platform, is its objective is to invest in a healthier futures and mainly targeting the primary healthcare. And you know, we have to start from there. So, and this investment has been actually approved by WHO and signed, and we are a contributor with the African Development Bank, with the European Investment Bank, the Inter-American Development Bank, and the Asian Development Bank are joining us too. So this will be one platform that could support all member countries that will be requiring to develop and implement their agenda related to AMR. The second one is related to the member countries that may be requesting a direct support, so lending directly. So we have this facility, I think you heard about it, which is the Lives and Livelihood Fund that is available, and we are supporting also here, thanks also to our donors. The Saudi Fund the King Salman Humanitarian Center. We have Abu Dhabi Fund for Development. We have Qatar Fund for Development, and and Kuwait Fund for Development. So we are supporting our member countries by providing them a grant element that is rendering concessional any lending that we will be providing to them. So depending on the countries, it's varying between 15% up to 30% of a grant element. Now I will be going to the third one, which is the private sector. So private sector also, we have not forgotten you, but we have a joint initiative at continental level with the African Development Bank. You have heard about the health industry, financing of the African Development Bank, and we have joined the African Development Bank in a deep dive exercise, not only deep dive exercise, but also in business development in the member countries. So we started by North Africa, actually. We had last month, 2 months ago in October, we had our first mission, business development mission in Egypt, and the next one will be in Morocco in November, and then we will move to the sub-Saharan countries. So and in this regard, so we are thinking of providing line of financing to major banks in our member countries to support either SMEs or to support the big pharma industry in terms of producing and also not only that biopharma, but also we will be supporting all the blockchain, all the value chain, so all the chain. So these are the three financing that it comes to my mind here with you. But we are happy also to discuss new financing as we go with our partners, IAEA, WHO, and for sure the G20, G7 team that have already been there, has always been there to support us in our discussion and this high-level think tank, let us say. You are really a think tank, Alan, in this regard. Thank you.
Yeah, we're very proud to be a knowledge partner with the Islamic Development Bank, and as I say, under the new leadership of the new president and also of AMR, we're seeing significant difference in the way in which the ISDB is operating. So talking about the involvement of the private sector, that seems to be an appropriate point, Thomas, to ask you to say some remarks here. And what I'm really interested in is, obviously, we had the COVID pandemic. How has that impacted private investment in health? And what do you see the prospects of picking up some of these innovative health initiatives that we're hearing about this afternoon, and Aviva's involvement in those sort of things?
Thank you, Alan. Thank you for inviting me to join this. I think the intersection between health issues and climate issues, as Alan, as others have said, is well established. And I think, unfortunately, the COVID pandemic has brought home to the world the financial and global impact of a health crisis. And what we see as we look at this issue is that the sort of silent pandemic, as Sally describes it, of AMR is no different in terms of its potential impact across the world, particularly from a financial point of view. We've heard from Simon and from Klaus that it represents a market failure, the incentives not being right, but it also represents, as climate change does, a macro financial stability risk, so a threat to the stability and integrity of the financial system. Because without, as well as the issues sort of relating to acute disease, as you described, Simon, in terms of hospital admissions and so on, actually the health impact on productivity of antibiotics not being available would be an enormous hit to the global economy, with estimates of 100 trillion by 2050 being wiped off the global economy, which is essentially equivalent to global GDP. So this extraordinary long-term hit to productivity that could come from AMR. So not only is it a macro financial stability risk, but for us as a financial institution that offers health insurance, that offers life insurance, and that holds investments, it's a threat to us on a financial level too. We saw in 2021 with the pandemic an enormous hit to financial valuations, and then unprecedented stimulus, 3 times the amount that the 2008 financial crisis was. The stimulus in 2008 was put in to prop markets up. And ultimately, governments don't have the fiscal headroom to do the same again. So this is something that we've got to avoid preemptively, and that's why we need action to protect the integrity of the antibiotic system, of the health system, from the spectre of antimicrobial resistance. And that's why we need global leadership of the sort that we're hearing described on the panel. The G7 has stepped up, the G20 stepping up, so seeing finance ministers in the G7 talking about the pull incentives, the subscription models that we've heard from other panelists, because we do need novel antibiotics, and the industry needs the security of predictable financial support to bring those to market, and as Klaus was saying, to allow them to be held in reserve as antibiotics of last resort. So there's this huge incentive on us as a business and on the financial community in general to act on this issue. There's a variety of ways that we can do that. One is in our portfolios. We own healthcare companies, and we can engage with them and encourage them to both protect the integrity of the bringing novel antibiotics to market, but also the production, and make sure we've got responsible production and stewardship of the antibiotics, and particularly in production the risks associated with waste produced, but also across different sectors. So, for example, our engagement with the agriculture sector and looking to avoid the prophylactic use of antibiotics, and dealing with waste from agriculture. In the food industry, so we're seeing big international brands like McDonald's, like Domino's, like Yum Brands making commitments to ensure that antibiotic use is responsible in their supply chains. And then globally, the financial industry has a voice in engaging with governments and policymakers to make sure that we get the things that we need on this issue. So in the context of climate change, a huge amount is set on the work of the body of scientists, so the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. The reports that they produce are the sort of the touchstone of the science on the issue, and our belief is that we need the same to broaden the knowledge base and create capacity building across on antimicrobial resistance. We think also learning again from climate change and atmospheric science, the way that one of the success stories for climate change is the way that the Montreal Protocol has largely dealt with the problem of the hole in the ozone layer. One of the reasons that worked is that there was a system where rich countries gave financial support to developing countries to phase out the use of CFCs. We believe a similar model could be used in terms of protecting antibiotics from prophylactic use, but the key is the finance mechanism, as it was in the Montreal Protocol, needs to be there. So those sorts of issues are things that financial bodies can bring into the discussion at both the micro and the macro level. Thank you.
Thomas, thank you very much, and we're going to be following up certainly on that last point with you, because I think this is going to be the crux of the issue as we try to get more investment. I'm conscious that Haile has to disappear at some point because he's rushing off to get a plane. But before he goes, I wanted to just ask David Rippon from the Clinton Health Access Initiative, who's Chief Scientist and Executive Vice President, if you'd just like to say something about this issue of the, I don't call it equity, I call it justice. The fact that we've got, a large part of the world that doesn't get access to any antibiotics, while we're talking here about new tools. And I just wonder, given your experience, David, what's your view on that, and what's CHAI doing in this area?
Thank you so much for inviting me. And Simon, I'm going to pay you for setting me up so perfectly a little bit later. Sally Davies joined our board of directors, and Sally doesn't ask, Sally tells. And Sally told us we will be working on AMR. In all seriousness, though, the lack of collective market action is half of the market failure issue we have. We have a global fund to fight AIDS, TB, and malaria. And we've seen increases in research, funding, and development of HIV medicines, TB medicines, and malaria medicines. there is no global fund for bacterial infections. Now, we've also learned from the Global Fund that we need to be thoughtful of how we transition beyond a funding mechanism. And we have patients in the market right now who are willing to pay for treatment. So, I'm not advocating a direct copy of the Global Fund model. However, the Global Fund enabled a large number of countries across the low and middle income spectrum to collectively act and signal demand and collectively procure and execute both diagnoses and treatments, which has fundamentally improved the shape of the market. And we see suppliers entering those spaces with new products to compete. I also want to say, fundamentally, I struggle with the concept of stewardship because, in a way, the way I hear it at least is a bit of protecting our arsenal against bacteria becoming resistant. Fundamentally, if a patient gets the wrong treatment or takes an antibiotic presumptively, the biggest failure is our failure to that patient to appropriately diagnose them first and treat them second. As a parent whose child woke up with ear infection and screamed, I was guilty of this. I went to the doctor and I was not going to leave without an antibiotic. I should have demanded a diagnosis. As a result of the lack of the global financing mechanism, a lot of bacterial infections are treated in the private sector. But we actually have some experience with this in the malaria space, where many years ago, patients were going into the private sector and buying exceptionally cheap, ineffective antimalarials, cost of roughly $1 or less to the patient. We had a wonderful new discovery, the artemisinin combination therapies, that cost roughly $10. And patients didn't have the incentive to do it. We developed a mechanism called the Affordable Medicines for Malaria, or AMFM. Now, it wasn't executed perfectly, but I think there's a lot to learn from it. And at the end of only a few years of programming, and the mechanism there was a subsidy to suppliers to essentially bring the cost of those ACTs entering private sector supply chains to the same price as the ineffective drugs. We have seen a wholesale shift in consumer behavior in the private sector. And now that that mechanism is over, ACTs still predominate as the product patients go out and buy. I think we need to think about that in the context of AMR. And so I have one specific program where I am most failing the patients who are coming to our programs, and that is our malaria program. Now, we've set out to eliminate malaria. And I think this is entirely relevant to Glide's portfolio and to your comments on a variety of neglected tropical diseases. As you approach elimination, from a Ministry of Health perspective, I have very few patients who suffer from that illness, and I have quite a number of other issues, and consequently, my level of resource and focus comes down. On the program side, I now have 99 out of 100 children coming in with a fever who have a negative malaria rapid test result. And I have nothing to do for them except send them on their way, perhaps take a few antibiotics presumptively, and call me if it gets worse. If I had a financing mechanism, then that is the pull. That's the impetus for training healthcare workers to use exactly that point of care diagnostic that you're dreaming of. And I'm going to start picking up the neglected tropical diseases in low prevalence because I'm going to have a principle of diagnose first, treat second. That's going to drive not entirely the financial incentive you need, but more predictable market behavior on the demand side of the market. So ultimately, this is what I advocate. Let's look from the patient perspective. I think we need some type of pooled collective action. It may look more like an episodic insurance scheme or something of the like, but we need to think about that pull. Otherwise, wonderful developers and organizations putting resource into bringing new products to the market push them into a vacuum. And right now, it's a lot cheaper to buy an antibiotic than it is to buy a diagnostic test result. So if I'm a patient, I follow the economic incentives. In order for me to rewrite an economic model which incentivizes the principles of stewardship, we need that collective mechanism. So thank you.
Thanks very much, David. And I want to thank, I'm going to ask a teacher, our executive director, just to say a few words in summing up, but I want to thank the whole panel. The purpose of this meeting was to, in the context of COP28, was to demonstrate how many different organizations, from government to not-for-profit organizations to the private sector, are prepared to cooperate during the course, certainly, of the next year. And one of the things we will do as the G20, G7 Health and Development Partnership is to very much work with you all to try and get some really concrete ideas here. And Hailey, I hope you've got some food for thought to go back when you travel back to Geneva, and we will all want to continue to support and work with you to make sure that it's a really successful 2024. So with that, Hatice, if you'd like to just conclude our session.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're not COP fatigued. Thank you for the amazing discussions. There was a reason why we brought this eclectic group together, because you all represent the global economy ecosystem in every basically part of the activities that you do. And what we heard when Alan and I arrived here in COP on Friday is that everyone agrees on what to do, actually, and that was mentioned even in your panel, Klaus, a few days ago, but no one really talks about how to do it. And I hope, having had the first health day as well at COP this year, we walk out of this, and especially you sitting here, to really discuss tangibly how to put policy to action. And just a few reflections, and then we will close off the session for today. The late Henry Kissinger said the contemporary structure of international norms and rules, if it is to prove relevant, cannot be affirmed by joint declarations. It must be fostered by a matter of common conviction. And I think you guys have the common conviction, and that's what you can show in the next few months. But we heard from Hailey, WHO, that the UN Secretary General and the Leaders Group have to not create another plethora of communiques, but an action-oriented recommendation pipeline, which we will strongly support as the partnership. We heard from Simon the power of science, the power of testing to treat properly, and the threat of NTDs in the next few years affected by climate change. Klaus, we heard that obviously incentives are hard in the market, but you also said that there's appetite, again, from your pharma company and others to invest into the antibiotic pipeline, which is good news. AMR, you have actually, amongst other 500 international development banks, there are around 500 banks, national development banks and multilateral banks worldwide. Under asset management, together combined, you have at the moment over 22 trillion of funding. So if you were to work with some of these folks here, you could unlock loans and grants in blended financing conditionalities going forward. So no pressure there. And David, you said it's actually now cheaper to buy an antibiotic than a test. I think that's something that Saudi Arabia can look into to see how we can bring a better testing regime in to strengthen stewardship for next year for your ministerial. And Thomas, you said that that there is definitely a macro-financial stability risk here. So I think there is a key responsibility for the investor community and the asset management community and insurance sector to work closely with the health community and the climate change community to build a better infrastructure, because I mean, if I was an investor in a low and middle income country, I wouldn't want to create a new plant and business if there is a risk of water being contaminated by AMR and my employees being affected long term. So we have to think of the whole cycle. That's what you outlined here. And Najat, last but not least, you spoke about the power of data. And the last day's conversations were all about the lack of data in this space, especially with health and climate change related risks, looking at AMR as well. And that's, I think, what we are focusing on as the G20 partnership, like Alan mentioned in the beginning, how we can bring better surveillance and data gathering in this space by putting politicians also and giving at the center and creating better accountability mechanisms between policymakers, governments, and the private sector. I didn't do enough justice to summarize the great value of these discussions, but I do hope it triggers your brain. You're going into the Christmas holiday period, so lots of time to think and start the new year with hopefully new partnerships, and I think that shows a great way forward. Thank you for coming today.